Are you drinking alcohol and it's causing you problems with your life? Don't stop drinking. Maybe not right away. Because today I have a special guest. His name is Duncan Bhaskaran Brown. And he will share with us how not to stop drinking right away. And he'll give us some insight and some tips how he stopped drinking, what life of joy he's living right now. And also I'm sharing a little bit of my story because I stopped drinking too, pretty much a year ago. So you are in here for a great interview. So listen till the end and make sure to take notes. So hi Duncan, thank you very much for coming to my podcast. As you are here for the first time, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? What is it you do? Maybe where are you based? What is your mission? So we can get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And Dan, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having a bit of a chat. So my name is Duncan Bhaskaran Brown. I live just outside Oxford with one wife, one daughter, two bonsai trees. My hobbies include falling off my inline skates and Morris dancing, which is a bit weird English kind of folk dancing thing. And yeah, so my mission in life. I guess some people mistake what I do. They think that I help people to stop drinking, but I don't. What I do is I help people to start living. And that's really at the heart of everything that I want to do. I want to kind of end the harm that alcohol does to people. And that's why I get out of bed. I do it in a few different ways. I write, I speak, I run events, I do one-to-one coaching, I do programs in companies, but it is all focused on that mission of reducing the harm that alcohol does in the world.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for sharing. And I have to say that a lot of people, when they think like stop drinking, they see that picture. I don't want to stop. It's a bad thing for me to stop because I enjoy it. But you are right, because I didn't manage to read all of your book, but I did read maybe 60 pages of that book, and the very first few chapters you are saying people like keep drinking. Keep drinking. Is that written? I'm like, real men quit, and like keep drinking. I was like, it's a good book. It's a good book. So yeah, I didn't manage to finish it, but there was one of the things what you mentioned. There was this concept of James Bond, which I found very intriguing. Like when you described it, would you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I mean, I should explain that that you might change your opinion on whether you need to keep drinking after about 60 pages or so. It doesn't say
Yeah.
keep drinking forever. It's just
Yeah.
that when you go about the desire to change your drinking patterns, whether that's to completely stop or to just kind of get a bit more control, you don't want to just jump into that without doing the work first. And a lot of that revolves around beliefs. And James Bond is the perfect illustration of what we believe around alcohol. Many people believe that drinking alcohol makes you sophisticated, that it makes you a man, that women will find you attractive if you drink alcohol, and possibly you'll become quite handy with a wolf of PPK. And part of the reason we believe that is, well, James Bond, isn't it? It's because throughout our lives, we've seen all of these associations with alcohol. If you want to look sophisticated, get yourself a white dinner jacket and a martini, and the girls will just be flocking to you. That's what we keep seeing, not simply in the Bond movies, but throughout all kind of films, television, streaming services, anything where you see people looking sophisticated, looking powerful, looking manly, you're likely to see alcohol not too far behind. And that's one of the principal places where people develop their beliefs about drinking. And what we try to do, and as the book progresses, what it tries to do is ask you, well, how true is that belief? Like, genuinely, does drinking alcohol make you more like James Bond, or does it make you more like Homer Simpson?
Yeah, you are right. I know that when you are comparing that, also when you are taking the step further, when you are comparing to like athletes and rugby players, when some of them, when they are not in the league, so they might have a few beers or something after the game, but when you look on the top people on the top of the game, they barely ever drink, because obviously they need to keep themselves in a good health and have full of energy in order to perform that kind of level, right?
I mean, I can get quite boring on the science of it. We can talk about, pro-inflammatory cytokines and things like that if you really want to, but I rather suspect your listeners don't. So what alcohol does is basically, because it is pro-inflammatory, and when you're recovering from, exertion, a lot of that is about reducing inflammation. So if you're adding something that increases the inflammation, it's not going to help your recovery.
Mm.
And recovering quicker is one of the keys to sporting success. It's why, sports stars do the ice baths and things like that. It's not because they actually enjoy them, it's because it increases your recovery. So modern elite sport is all about, improving your recovery, whereas alcohol actually reduces your recovery, which is why if you look at the top of pretty much any sport going, you will find people who don't drink. So Novak Djokovic, the most successful male tennis player in the history of tennis, doesn't drink. Tom Brady, the most successful American football player in the history of American football, doesn't drink. Floyd, the Money Mayweather, 50 fights, totally undefeated, doesn't drink. Cristiano Ronaldo, probably the prettiest person to ever play professional sport, and he doesn't drink. And if you think he doesn't drink because he's too girly, Harry Kane, current England captain, doesn't drink.
Mm. Mm. All right. And I have a question. You also described that in that book, but obviously I'll ask anyway because there are some people they didn't read that book yet, and you can get it in the description because I'll include that link there. But can you tell us why people start drinking?
Oh, that is a properly interesting question, and one that we could probably spend the entire podcast discussing. And honestly, there are a lot of different reasons behind it. A lot of it has to do with the society, the community that you grow up in, because that's where you develop a lot of your beliefs from. We mirror the behavior of people. That's one of the foundational ways that we learn to do things, is mirroring behavior. So if you grow up in surrounded by people who drink, then you're going to mirror that behavior. So that is a massively important part of it. The way people develop problems with drinking is partly due to the fact that alcohol is an addictive poison. It is just problematic as a substance. So we can't underestimate the role of the substance in that. You can then add a small amount of genetics. There is usually a genetic predisposition to certain behaviors, and some people are genetically predisposed to drinking more, and some people are predisposed to drinking less. That's not like your destiny. That's just a kind of like it's pointing you a little bit in a direction, but if you don't walk in that direction at all, then you're never going to have the problem. So there are plenty of people out there who just don't drink, who don't have a drinking problem despite having the genetics. Then you can add to that, what was your upbringing like? Trauma very much is associated with drinking. Not everybody that has a problem with drinking has trauma in their childhood or in their adult life, but it is fairly common. That being said, of course, I meet a lot of people who drink because of the social situations that they find themselves in. They find themselves in a group of people that are drinking, so they drink, or they find themselves in an industry where there's a lot of drinking, so a lot of drinking becomes connected to where they work. It could be to do with a little bit of social anxiety, but then again, it could be to do with the other end. It's just being quite outgoing and wanting to party. So there are honestly a huge cluster of different interactions and different elements that make up the reasons why somebody drinks. But honestly, I'm not sure that they're that important. Why you started drinking is far less important than what you actually do about it.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing. It just remind me one thing when I was a child, when I was young. So my father, he drinks a lot, and there was a lot of bad things what happened, and I know that I remember so many times I said to my mom, like, I will never be drinking. I'll never be drinking because I've seen what all of this causing. But after when I grew up and I was an adult, suddenly I found myself drinking. I'm like, so how is that belief of not drinking because I've seen some bad things happening didn't stick with me, and and I mirror that behavior anyway. So it's like kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, so I find that very, very interesting. And if you look at the children of parents with alcohol issues, they tend to go one of two ways. They
Mm,
either tend to drink fairly heavily or they tend to not drink at all. So
mm,
some of them do stick with that kind of like, I've just, I have, I have seen the problems that alcohol does. That being said, talking to people who don't drink, whose parents had drinking issues, you often you can underpick other behaviors that they use to deal with that kind of traumatic upbringing, which
mm,
are sometimes around other substances. So it could be around maybe food rather than alcohol,
mm,
and it could be around certain behaviors. So the idea of being kind of like a people pleaser and trying to always soften out the tension. That's something that you see quite a lot in children of alcoholic parents,
mm,
because they spend so much time in this kind of tense, unstable environment that they
mm,
just that's the reaction that they take from it. That
mm,
they've got to smooth over all of these tensions all of the time. But
mm,
unfortunately, alcohol is a very socially acceptable way of attempting to numb your pain. It
mm,
is not a particularly effective way of attempting to numb your pain, but it is very socially acceptable.
mm,
And that's one of the real problems with alcohol is when you first start using it, it does feel like it works, but over the long run, it doesn't. It does the exact opposite. It doesn't numb your pain. It starts to become your pain. And again, you can go into all of the neurology of this, but the more time you spend trying to numb negative emotions, what actually happens with alcohol is it just dampens down all of your emotions, not simply the negative
mm,
ones. And you start to live this very bland kind of life where you don't really feel anything at all.
mm,
So it sort of seems like it's working in the start. And that's why a lot of people, despite their better, uh, you know, judgment on the subject, they know how bad it is, but because it's so socially acceptable, because everybody's doing it, they try it and it seems to be effective. And unfortunately, what they've done is they've basically fallen into the same trap that their parent fell into.
mm, mm. Yeah. I mean, when you are speaking about this being socially accepted, things like that, it's very interesting because, for example, I'm from Czech Republic originally, so I've been back home this year in January, and I actually stopped drinking in July last year. So I stopped like nothing at all, and so we traveled there, and my auntie, she invited us to for lunch with families around, but she's divorced because of drinking of her husband. My parents are divorced because of drinking of my brother. My brothers, especially one, drinks quite a lot. The other families, they drink also the children quite a lot. And we've been there, and it's three brothers, like me and two brothers, and my dad. My dad wasn't drinking that day because he was driving. My second brother, he was going to work as a lorry driver in the evening, so he didn't drink. The second brother, he was going for work for 3 weeks away, so he would be going away, so he didn't drink. And I wasn't drinking because I decided to stop. But instead of them, or auntie encouraging us, like, "Oh, well done," it was more like, "Oh, look at the family of," and they said our surname. Uh, Nobody drinks. How funny, right? And they kind of laughed in our face that nobody drinks, and I found it very strange when person like that says it to us instead of encouraging us, like, "Well done for not drinking, it's really good because obviously it ruined our lives." So they kind of laughed, and I've been asked, I think, 20 times that evening, "Have a beer, why you don't drink, you are weird." I was like, what? Instead of encouraging you. I was like, and I know you described it in that book that it's the only drug when people ask you, like, you need to tell them the what's the word?
The reason why you're not
Yeah,
drinking. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's like, how often do people come up to you and say, why don't you have some crack cocaine?
Yeah.
No, shoot up some heroin. It's like literally, it is the only drug. And I mean, even now, smoking is so, unacceptable that Nobody bats an eyelid if you don't smoke. In fact, you get encouragement if you stop smoking. People say, "Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant."
Mm,
And I think things are changing. I think because more and more people are choosing to stop drinking, and I think because more and more people are starting to talk about it, things are changing. You will find a lot of places where people are quite supportive of your decision not to drink. But unfortunately, the people who seem to be loudest are the ones who aren't particularly important. So, aren't particularly supportive.
mm,
So if you take a room of sort of 20 people, I guarantee five of them are thinking, good on you for stopping drinking. 10 of
mm,
them probably are fairly indifferent about it. Two or three of them are probably thinking, well, that's a bit odd. But it's the one or two that are shouting about it and are saying, oh, come on, have a beer, have a beer. They're the ones. Well, why are they doing that? I think that's the thing you've got to get at. But they're the ones that are the loudest,
mm,
and it is deeply unhelpful in our society. And I think it's deeply unhelpful that in workplaces, it's completely socially acceptable to just make jokes about drinking alcohol.
mm,
And personally, I sort of I'm a big boy and I have quite a thick skin, and I don't really get offended when people make jokes about that. But I've started to sort of talk about it a little bit more
mm,
and bring it up when people say, "Oh yeah, well it's wine o'clock, isn't it?" I'm like, well, is that really an acceptable thing to say in a workplace environment? Because when you laugh at drinks, when you buy somebody a birthday card with, you know, like what are you going to do on your birthday? One, get drunk. Two, see one. Three, see one. It's just like, why are you wishing somebody to get drunk on their birthday? I mean,
mm,
you're sort of ignoring the experiences of people like me and people like yourself who have taken the decision to stop drinking. Because usually we take that decision and we don't take it lightly. We usually do that because there's been a lot of pain and suffering in our lives caused by alcohol. So
mm,
when you laugh at it, I can't help but think that you're probably laughing a little bit at my pain. When you minimize it, I think you're kind of minimizing my pain when you're almost pretending I don't exist. And I think
mm.
that's the real change that we need to bring about in the workplace in particular, but in society in general, to help people to understand that if you stop drinking, it is always for a very good reason. So, of course, we should support people. We shouldn't be laughing at them. We shouldn't be pressurizing them. And as I say, I do genuinely think things are changing. They just need to change a little bit quicker,
Mm.
as they always do.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. I just want to share one point actually on that note. When I was sharing that story, when they asked me 20 times, like why you don't drink, why you don't drink, and after there was a time, uh, me and my cousin were like, okay, let's continue, being out, for a little bit longer because I'm not there very often. And it's like, where do you want to go? Because you don't drink. And he thought I'll be drinking. He didn't think like I want to go out with him and not be drinking. And I'm like, oh, let's go to a tea room because I really love teas and there's lots of tea rooms in Czech Republic. I was like, do they have alcohol there? I'm like, yeah, sure, they'll have alcohol, no problem. We came to the tea room. There was no alcohol, knew it. And I was like, so what shall I have? I'm like, let's have a tea. We are in a tea room. So I ordered some proper Japanese teas. And we've been there maybe for 2 hours. We were playing chess because I'm a chess player and he as well. And we were chatting. And after at the end of these 2 hours, when we were about to go home, he was like, do you know what? We didn't drink. We had just a tea. But it was a good fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm like, see, you don't need, you don't need an alcohol in order to enjoy yourself. And I asked him like, do you have any friend a part of me because I don't live here. Do you have any other friend who doesn't drink? And it's like, no. I'm like, yeah. So that's the problem, obviously. Yeah. You don't have
Yeah, yeah,
anybody support you. So obviously you are like five closest people around you.
yeah. And I mean, I think there's so much in what you just said, and I think that's one of the things that we sort of miss about alcohol. We go out with our friends and we drink alcohol, and therefore we think that alcohol is interesting and fun, when in actual fact, it is your friends that are interesting and fun.
Yeah.
and the alcohol isn't really bringing very much to the table. It's just as much fun if you go out with them and drink tea as it is if you drink beer. And the really weird thing is, neither of you are sitting there going, wow, this tea is amazing. It's really helping me have this great time, isn't it? Whereas, of course, you swap that story and you put beer in there instead of tea, and everyone will be going, oh, yeah, of course, you had a great time because you were drinking beer. You know,
Yeah.
it's like we take the power away from ourselves and from our friends and from the social interactions that are so important to our lives. We take it from those things. We take the power from ourselves and we just give it to alcohol. And that, I think, is one of the saddest things about society at the moment.
Yeah. Then, like you mentioned, one of the things in the book, which it's kind of weird because when you ask someone like, on your weight, you should drink 2.5 liters of water or whatever. People are like, oh, so much water. But when you are going with someone for a beer, and I'm from beer country, so there is a lot of beers going on. It's like, why, like you said in the book, like, why are you drinking so slow? Like, drink it faster. And you should drink like 8, 10 beers, in one go, which is like 4 or 5 liters. And you're like, you don't drink that much water ever, and suddenly you should drink that much beer in one go, and you are kind of encouraged to do it. And if not, it's like, you are so slow. You are not keeping up the pace. Yeah.
Yeah. It's because I mean, particularly around beer and men, it's because we tie up this idea of manhood with
Yeah.
drinking alcohol. You know, what better way to prove that you're a real tough guy by drinking a lot of poison?
Mm. Yeah.
But it's not true. I mean, the strongest men that we ever see, that we ever get exposed to, the sportsmen,
Mm.
the real tough guys, were really out there, knocking on the door, doing it every day. They're not drinking. In fact, I read Daniel Craig's personal trainer's book. It's called
Mm.
Intelligent Fitness. It's quite a good book if you happen to be into will sapping plyometric exercises. It's a great book. But he went through Daniel Craig's sort of regime for getting into shape for Bond. So that famous scene in Casino Royale when he walks out of the water in his swimming trunks, he's got the six pack and everything. That's what we associate with James Bond,
Mm.
and therefore we associate it with martinis. So that image is being used to sell martinis.
Mm.
But how much did martinis actually go into creating that image? You know,
Yeah.
it's funny. Daniel Craig's personal trainer didn't mention drinking martinis once. He
Yeah.
he mentioned getting up at 5 a.m. He mentioned sweating for a couple of hours. He mentioned drinking espresso quite a bit, to be fair. But he never mentioned that part of Daniel Craig's regime to get into shape for that beach body scene, he never mentioned alcohol because alcohol played no part in it. And Daniel Craig does drink, but I'm pretty sure when he was getting up at 5 in the morning to exercise for a couple of hours with this guy, he was drinking a lot less than he normally would. And I
Mm.
think that's part of the thing that we really need to understand is that we get sold this image of alcohol, but actually what is used to create that image, it's not alcohol. We're sold the image, but actually no alcohol goes into creating it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you could call that an illusion of truth. You could call it a falsehood. You could call it misleading. You could call it a lie if you really, really wanted to. But I
Yeah.
think we've got to kind of like get to grips with our understanding of what alcohol actually does and
Yeah.
how it is presented to us. And we've got to ask these questions. We've got to say, is this true?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, a lot of those things with are happening because it's money, right? So companies
Yeah,
makes
well,
money,
incidentally,
government makes money.
Heineken paid 45 million euros to sponsor Casino Royale, or was it
Mm.
Skyfall? It was one of the
Mm.
recent bonds.
Yeah.
It's 45 million to become the official beer of James Bond.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. So I have another question for you. Why have you started with that mission of yours to help people to start living?
So really, it comes from my own experience. So I started drinking as a teenager, parties. When we were young, it all seemed like fun and excitement, didn't it? And alcohol seemed to provide me with so many things. It seemed to, reduce my social anxiety, seemed to make me funnier, even made me more attractive with the lady. So at least that's what I thought. And what I found as things went on, the social nature of it that sort of started to decrease. So I started off drinking only at parties, only drinking with lots and lots of people. But the numbers of people over the years went down and down and down and down. And when I started off drinking, I wasn't drinking that much. I was just drinking on the, Saturday night, maybe the Friday as well. But I wasn't drinking huge amounts. So, but over time, the amount I drank went up and up and up. So the way that it was social went down, the way that I was drinking went up, and I took it to its logical conclusion. And I ended up sitting on my own drinking 2 bottles of wine a night, which is honestly not much fun.
Mm.
If you'd asked me at the time, I would have told you I was having a lot of fun. I'd have told you that everything was brilliant. And to be fair, I was pretty successful. I was doing all right for myself, but um, honestly, I was miserable and I wasn't really doing something with my life that I actually wanted to do. I wasn't, you know, living to my full potential by any stretch of the imagination, but I wasn't even really doing anything that I was particularly interested in. It
Mm.
looked good, but it felt bad. And, eventually the stars aligned and I stopped drinking. And when I did, I woke up the next morning feeling fantastic. All of a sudden, I had a clear head and a lot of energy.
Mm.
And, genuinely, my focus improved, my memory improved, my concentration improved, my energy improved. Like literally everything about my life got better. I had this sort
Mm.
of sense of peace and calm and tranquility. And don't get me wrong, there is still stress in my life, but it's so much easier to deal with now.
Mm.
And at the time, I was sort of helping people succeed in local government. I was doing some coaching and some training and some writing, and I've always been involved in that kind of area of adult education, I suppose. So I realized that what I was helping people to do was to replicate some of the success I'd had in the past, but
Mm.
it became pretty clear pretty quickly that the biggest success I'd ever had in my life was stopping drinking. So it's like, well, why am I not sharing this? Why am I hoarding all of this good
Mm.
stuff? This wonderful feelings of energy and focus. Why am I hoarding them all to myself? To share this stuff.
Mm.
So I just pointed, my communication skills, my coaching, training, writing ability. I just I did a load of qualifications and learned a bit of stuff first, and then just pointed it towards helping people to stop drinking and just share that amazing joy that I got from
Mm.
stopping.
Yeah, yeah. I can say myself as well. Since I stopped drinking alcohol and also I stopped drinking coffee, I in the next I think 1 month or 2 months I lost like 8 kilos, and I had much more energy just from doing those two changes, and I can see it like I'm progressing much faster with everything in my life, more energy with playing with my children, more energy for the business. So it's definitely like you are saying, it's a good way to have a beautiful life if you can get rid of that thing, and if you don't
And
know
I
how.
think you've hit on it nicely there. I mean, if you just look at that idea of energy and focus in the business world, that is getting stuff done. That is moving forward. That's writing the book, doing the sales calls, whatever. It's all of the kind of the business stuff that you want to achieve. Energy and focus is at the very heart of it. But actually, what do you need to play with your kids? You want to go to the park with your kids? What do you need? You need energy and focus. That translates into presence. That translates into attention. That translates into the kind of stuff that your kids need. So it literally improves every area of your life. And that is so sweet.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great. And I have actually two more questions I would like to ask. One is, what is kind of, I know that you described your mission, that why you started doing that. Where do you want to take it? Because I know you are obviously a speaker, author, you do coaching. Where do you see yourself in the, next 5, 10 years? What is it like? Do you have any like a bigger vision? What you want to achieve with your message?
Yeah, so I mean, I really do nothing short of totally and utterly ending the harm that alcohol does to people. I don't completely want to remove alcohol from the world. I mean, for no other reason than it's actually quite a good surface disinfectant.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not here to make everybody stop drinking. But what I do want to do is help people to understand that there are a couple of things about drinking, and one is the risk. That is how likely it is over the long term to cause any of the major serious problems that alcohol can cause. Briefly, being cancer, heart disease, diabetes. Three things I'm pretty sure most people want to ignore. And unfortunately, that is the focus of a lot of health campaigns. They talk about the risk of you contracting cancer, heart disease, or diabetes. And that's bad, don't get me wrong. But what I think we should really focus on is the effect, because the risks are risks and they're calculated statistically, they're calculated over large numbers of people. And it might happen to you, or you might end up like that 80-year-old that apparently everybody has met who drank every day and never had a single problem in their life. You know, you might be like that one outlier, or you might be like the vast majority of people who get the risks sit at that kind of middle ground. But that I don't think that really changes people's opinions. What I like to talk about is the effects that you get from alcohol, because you get the effects of alcohol every time you drink it. That is guaranteed. You cannot do anything to cheat that. In fact, that's the reason why most people drink alcohol, is because it has an effect on them.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's a good effect or a bad effect, you can argue with. But the science is becoming increasingly clear that actually the positive feelings of drinking alcohol come from the first drink. And after that, the effects that you get are more like loss of balance. You speak a lot louder, your hearing and your eyesight become less effective. You start to fall over and vomit everywhere. So it's actually that first drink that could be conceived of as pleasurable. Anything after that first drink, you're starting to get the negative effects even as you're drinking it. And interestingly, the next day, that first drink has a lot less of an effect on you than the second drink. So the second drink is where you start to get into the bad effects the next day. So I'm not talking about hangovers. You know, this is just the mild negative effects, but they start to stack up once you get to that second drink. That second drink is enough to raise your cortisol levels by about 18%. And I'm sure your listeners know that cortisol is the stress hormone. So if you're drinking to reduce your stress, you've got to be aware that you've actually increased it by about 18% when you're having that second drink. That second drink is also enough to reduce the quality of your sleep. So if you look at sleep, the really important bit, the deep REM sleep, when you're learning things and you're processing information and you're kind of really recharging your body, that bit of your sleep is affected by alcohol. So much so that our two drinks will decrease that quality sleep by about 24%. So we're starting to see that actually, if you want to get some pleasure from drinking, one drink is the place to go. And if you want to minimize the negative effects, then one drink is the place to go. So, you know, my mission is to help people to stop drinking if that is the thing that they really want to do, but to get their drinking into the low risk, low effect area if that is, you know, what they want to do. So that is why we spend a lot of time kind of working with companies and helping them to, you know, get the message out there that actually low risk drinking is a lot less than most people think. Because, you know, if you start talking about moderate drinking, I have met people who drink a bottle of wine a day who'll tell you they're moderate drinkers. So we always talk about low risk drinking, and it's about helping people to understand what that is and to keep their drinking in that low risk level so that they can actually enjoy it. Because that's it. If you're going to do it, I want you to enjoy it, you know. And if you don't enjoy it, then stop doing it. That's fine. But if you are going to enjoy it, if you are going to do it, you know, reduce your risk and increase your pleasure. And one of the things that we found is these kind of techniques like mindfulness and actually paying attention, they increase your pleasure because you start to actually be aware of what you're doing.
Mhm.
And if you're drinking just because it's Tuesday, if you're drinking just because Netflix is on, if you're drinking just because, you're not really aware of it. And if you're not really aware of it, you ain't enjoying it.
Mhm.
So I guess that's kind of what we're really trying to do, is to help educate people into this idea of what low risk, high pleasure drinking looks like, and then get everybody so that they're drinking in that lowest risk area, and or they're not drinking at all, and that's really going to totally and utterly reduce the harm that alcohol does.
Okay, amazing, perfect. Thank you very much for that. Last question before we will wrap it up. If someone is feeling that they are in a situation that they might drink too much and they know that it's causing them some problems at the moment, either at work, with their health, they don't kind of know how to stop. And I recommend them to read your book, but before they'll order it, before they'll read it, what will be maybe one or two things they can start doing right now in order to move to the right direction?
I think the most important thing to acknowledge is, if you have had that thought, you have taken a massive step in life. And if you think about it, if you think about Lord of the Rings, right at the start of the Lord of the Rings, Frodo gets the ring, and Gandalf tells him a little bit. He gives him a little bit of information, sends him off on his way. He doesn't tell him the whole thing. He doesn't like basically outline how you walk to Mount Doom and throw the ring in that. He just kind of gets him out the door, gives him a small amount of information, gets him out of the door. And if you're starting to realize that the drinking is a problem, then you've taken that first step, haven't you? You've started to build that awareness. You've started to walk out of your hobbit
Mm.
hole. And look, I don't know what your journey is going to be like. You ain't going to get chased by the fighting Uruk-hai, though, so don't worry about it. It's not some like tortuous and long mission, but the important thing is that first step, stepping outside of the door, that is massive, and nothing happens until you do that. And I know you know that, Vincent. I know you are a huge fan of take action. And
Yeah.
so at that point, once you've stepped out the door and you've realized that there's an issue and you've become aware of it, you're in a position to solve it. And at that point, I would almost say, do something, do anything, just take action. There are a lot of people out there that want to help you. So get connected, jump online. There are loads and loads of great groups on Facebook, or great people speaking about sobriety, or speaking about how to get a better relationship with your alcohol, on Instagram, or even on LinkedIn these days. There's more and more people talking about it. So, get to know them, hear their stories, hear what they have to say, see what advice they're going to give you. And there's, broadly speaking, 4 ways of stopping drinking. You can do a group program. That's probably the most famous way. That's like Alcoholics Anonymous. But there are lots of other groups. If you feel put off by AA, but you like the idea of a group program, then think about something like Smart Recovery, or even Recovery Dharma. They're very different to AA, but they are group programs. So you get all that support. If you're quite sociable, then that's probably the right place for you. You can take a therapeutic approach. So you can go and see a therapist. You can work through what's underlying your drinking. And most people that do that, they find the behavior kind of falls away once they've worked through the underlying problem. You can do cognitive realignment, which is what I do, which is, it's kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy, but I think it's more effective. And that's getting to grips with the beliefs. All of that stuff we talked about, James Bond, right at the start.
Mm.
Deal with the beliefs, and then the behavior falls away. Or, honestly, the most popular way to stop drinking. You can stop smoking as well, but that's probably another episode. The most common way of stopping drinking, about 45% of people who stop drinking, they do it without any formal support. They probably read a few books, listen to a few podcasts,
Mm.
go on a few websites. So you do not need to go to rehab. You do not have to spend a ton of money. You can actually do it on your own, and a lot of people do. That said, you should always do it under medical advice. Very few people have severe withdrawal problems from alcohol, but those kind of things do exist. So if you are at all concerned, you should obviously speak to your doctor before undergoing any major behavior change. All of
Mm.
the caveats there. And like, if it really feels bad, call an ambulance, dude. But yeah, it just, be aware that actually a lot of people find a way out sort of kind of on their own without much formal support. But if you want some support, there's loads there for you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing, because I know I'm not going to be spoiling it, but I know that in the book I am a true believer that, if you want to achieve anything, it's taking these small steps like you described in the Lord of the Rings. Just, you don't need to know everything. You don't need to know how it's all going to end up, but just take a small bit of action, and the next one and the next one. And in your book, you have nicely put one small action at the very start of that book, which has nothing to do with drinking, but it's actually changing something in your head. And it's very powerful. And I'll leave it in here, because I'll leave that description of the book so you can get it and you can start exercising that for yourself. And I hope that can help you to change your life as Duncan wants you to.
Yeah, and I did that very small action is, of course, to do with drinking tea or coffee in the morning, and it's to do with the book, which is why we, of course, have the branded coffee cups, because it helps you to remember.
Absolutely. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much for coming on my podcast. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to see you soon as well.
Oh, no, thanks, man. It's been fun.